Welcome to the Analog Gamers Podcast, a short podcast on board games and board gaming experiences. Here are your hosts.
I'm Shane.
And I'm Brent.
And I'm Frank.
Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about playing games in a more familiar environment versus playing them with a group of people or out in public that you aren't really familiar with or have never really played with before, and how some of the differences that happen there and some of what you got to watch for and what you got to do while you're in those two different situations. I know I don't have a whole lot of familiarity with playing with unfamiliar groups, except when I started in a now familiar group.
Meaning us?
At one point I was unfamiliar, therefore that was at that time, but you kind of got to be a little more aware when you don't know what you're walking into. Shane, I know you have more experience with playing with unfamiliar groups.
So most of my experience playing out in a public forum, that sounds incredibly formal, venue, right? So at least in our area, we've had quite a few board game cafes popping up over the last few years that gives people an opportunity to go, they have a wall covered in games, and you can, a lot of places you'll pay like a fee when you walk, like a cover. I forget what they're called, but you pay like a cover, like $5 to get in the door, and then you can play whatever game you want. They call them a shelf fee, a library fee. They call it a library fee to play one of the games in their library. So you might pay $5 walking in the door, and then you can play whatever game you want on the shelf. So I've done that a few times, and actually up in Columbus, and we've had a really great time. The only difference there is I went with a group, so we didn't necessarily, play with a bunch of strangers. So I imagine that experience has to be pretty different between like going with a group and just, it's basically like, I didn't want to make a mess at my house, so we're going to go here, play a game we've never played, and, drink somebody else's beer, versus like, I'm going to go by myself and try and discover a group to play with.
So did you play games that you didn't have on your own collection?
Yeah, I would love to remember which games we played. We played a war game that it was, I'm going to try and describe this and see if it's familiar. That was like Risk, but you also had like individual historical leaders. So you might be playing on the map, and then you could use, I'm trying to think of leaders, but I can't think of anyone other than
What
like
era?
the Axis.
So it was World War II.
Maybe.
Okay.
That's all you can think about
That's
right
the only
now.
military leaders
Is
I
that
can think
because you
of.
can't remember the game, or is that because you don't know enough history to place it in time?
A little bit of both.
Okay, but haven't you played in Magic tournaments and stuff too?
So, not tournaments, I've just gone and played casual, so gone to a card shop and sat down and play Magic, and that is with strangers, and that is quite an experience to do, is play Magic out in public. We talked previously in the podcast about philosophy of gaming, and by far one of the hardest things, so I mostly play Commander in Magic, which is you get 100 unique cards in a deck, and you can play like up to 8 people around the table, which gets nuts. The problem when you sit down with 8 people you don't know, completely different philosophies. I mean, you've got guys at the table who are just like, I'm just here to mess with people and get reactions from them. You've got guys who are like, I've paid $4,000 for my deck and I just want to annihilate everybody. Then you got people like me who I'm like, I put $20 into my deck and I really enjoy playing, so thanks for having me, everyone.
So, is that 100 unique cards?
So,
like, as in no duplicates?
Other than your lands, which help you play other cards, yes, it's everything's unique. So typically it works out to about 30 to 40 of the lands, and then 60 to 70 unique cards. You can't have duplicates.
That's an aside. I was just curious.
Yeah. So playing Magic in public is, or going to a game shop. I say in public, I imagine myself like on the side of a fountain, like playing. going to a game shop, it's pretty unique. It's pretty tough.
Get arrested for public nudity.
Yeah. Oh gosh. That's when you play D&D in public. You're looting bodies.
The reason I asked that question is, did you guys have any idea what the rules were walking in, or did you have to actually play learning as well as trying to play and enjoy your time that you spent to come into this place?
Yeah. So I assume you're talking about the board games.
Yeah. I assume you know how to play Magic before you walked in to play Magic.
Oh man, you'd be murdered if you didn't know.
Why you have
probably literally murdered.
I don't know.
So one of the really cool things about where we went and I'm trying to remember the name of it. Kingmakers in Columbus, and I'm sharing that because we had awesome experiences. It was a really great place. If you're in the Columbus area, I would definitely recommend checking it out. But their staff knew how to play pretty much every game on their shelf. I think there were typically 2 to 3 of them working, and one of them would know how to play a game. So when we played, they came over and kind of taught us the game or what we would need to know to play the game, because none of us had played, at least that time, none of us had played that game before. So that was pretty cool to have them there to kind of show us how to play. Now, obviously, they couldn't tell us all the rules or help us with strategies we're playing because they're going around and kind of checking on everybody and helping everybody. In my understanding is that other board game cafes, typically they have people that can help teach you or at least get you into the, your first or second turn of the game before you get to play.
That's impressive. I want to know what the training regime looks like for that.
Yeah, no kidding. Here, take this home and read it. Oh, wow.
What it seemed like, I think the nights we were there was just the 2 owners and then maybe a third. It was pretty much like their personal collection that, they stuck up on the shelves and played. So I think they had said before they put a game on the shelf, they tried to play it at least once. I imagine sometimes you'll grab a game off the shelf that the people working that night haven't played because it's somebody else that knows it, but they're at least familiar enough with games that they can, quickly go through the rule book and say, all right, I know these mechanics, I know this general game style, so I can at least get you in that far.
Yeah, shorten your learning period. So I think what you hit on that probably caught my attention more than anything else was the idea that you came with the Magic. You come in and there are different philosophies at the table right there. And it strikes me that that's probably the biggest difference between going someplace public, and that could be a board gaming store, that can be a board gaming cafe, that could be going to a chess club. There's going to be a difference in the potentially in the philosophies that you have no control over, as opposed to having a group that meets at home where that philosophy, the person who's hosting is going to get to call what that philosophy is.
Yeah, I think when you have a group in your home too, it kind of naturally coalesces. So, if you have 6 competitive players and 2 casual players, I hate to say it, but those 2 casual players kind of get weeded out, and they just don't keep coming. So eventually the group kind of forms itself around a common philosophy. But, when you go out in public, and I think too, if it's just you going to play with other people that you don't know, right? If you take your own group, I think that's one thing. But I think if it's just you going to play people you don't know, you have to be flexible and you have to be willing to play at the conditions of everybody else around the table. Because you can't go into a group. So say there's 3 people and you join that group to play a 4-player game. You can't expect those other 3 people to match you. You have to match those other 3. So I think it requires flexibility.
To some extent, I would think. Some things you're not going to change on.
Right. But I at least think for that individual game, you have to be willing to kind of give up some of what you want or what you like.
Part of what keeps me from playing at a game store or something like that is, first of all, I'm not the best in terms of comfort. I'm not the most comfortable meeting new people by myself. It's just not my comfort. But the other thing is I don't want to get into a game that either I have no interest in, but that's the game that we're playing.
Yeah.
I'm willing to do that more with friends, but with strangers, to have strange new people, let's not call them strange people, to have new people and a game I'm not wild about, that combination would be hard on me. And secondly, I'm not, if they're hyper competitive or something like that, I imagine the worst of that combination comes, and that's what keeps me away. The flip side of that is when you do it in your home, so I'll give you my perspective on hosting because I normally am running a game group. And probably the biggest drawback is you got to make sure the house is relatively ready to receive guests. And we've gotten a lot more casual about that at our house. We don't worry about it quite as much because we've become family. And that's probably the biggest advantage, I think. And this comes out of our group philosophy But one of the big things is when you have people in your home and they approach the same way, we have kind of become a community. And that also, one of the benefits of that is we don't worry about having every last thing put away before everybody shows up. Okay, so the living room didn't get vacuumed before everybody. It's fine, as long as the kids aren't picking stuff off the floor and sticking in their mouths, we're good.
Lexi does anyways at home, so it doesn't really matter.
So
yeah, you're like, this is how we live. Take it or leave it.
Yeah. So that's all good, and you do recognize that there was more cleanup, right? So those are probably the things. I'm training a trade.
He's training us.
Yeah. At times it does feel like we're getting trained. That's true.
Okay, I was going to cut that part out, but that's not going to happen now. I have to leave it in now.
I was going to say, that was kind of a Freudian slip.
I feel like I'm trading the social awkwardness for a little bit more cleanup, and I'm more than willing to accept that trade, right? I mean, that's me. Now, that's my perspective as the person who is, quote unquote, hosting. But the flip side of that, when we talk about philosophy and stuff like that, we're also, you guys are coming as a married couple. You guys are coming as a married couple.
Yeah.
And the competitive games we like, the wives don't enjoy the same games exactly that we do.
Yeah, we get to a certain depth that they really enjoy with us, but then I feel like we go to a dark place in competitiveness that they're just not willing to go.
And that's not always true, but the simple fact is we almost have two philosophies within the group, right? And so that's a dynamic of having a gaming group in your home with couples.
And I would say, I think the good thing of that is we typically have enough people to have two tables. So we can have a more competitive table and a more casual table. Relatively speaking, for us, competitive versus casual.
Right.
There's not that huge of a gap. Which really allows us to, like, if I'm kind of in a crappy mood, I don't necessarily want to dig deep into a game. So I can be at the casual table and play a more casual game as well.
There are definitely times that it's more fun to play a casual game than to actually dig into a depth of a game. So
especially if we know it. There is some level of, and I guess this is another distinction potentially between going outside to play, so to speak, and staying in your home to play with a group. When you're out there, as I kind of alluded to before, you have less control over what game is being played. And so you might be learning new games more often. Whereas at home, you can say, you know what, I don't have the time or energy to put into learning a new game. So we're going to pull out a game that we've played a dozen times and we all know the rules to, and that's what we're going to play because that's where the energy level is. And because typically one table who's playing a game we know, and we don't have both tables playing games that are new at the same time, typically is where I'm going with this. So you can float back and forth. Okay, so I feel like there is a new game on the one table, but I don't feel like learning a new game. I'm going to float to the other table, regardless of whether it's more casual or more complicated or whatever. I can choose those things too.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm curious about, because this is what I would worry about going alone, and how many people are there to pick up a game with strangers at one of those public places, or how many come with a group instead to play as a group. And so you're stuck on the outside of that as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that board game cafes do well as a lot of shops I've gone to play Magic, is they will actually have specific times or events for groups to form there rather than bringing a group. So they'll have nights where they actually invite, I don't want to say singles, but individual people to come. I don't know, they might have mixers.
So
what better place to meet your future spouse than over a good game of Ticket to Ride?
So,
but yeah, so they'll actually have events where they invite.
I think you pitch that as a slogan, by the way.
Yes, Ticket to Ride for love. Come ride the love. I don't know.
Wow. Okay.
Now let's go to a bad place.
Let's move along real quick.
But yeah, so they'll actually have events. So even if I think about Magic, they'll have like competitive commander nights and casual commander nights. Now, there's always competitive people no matter which night it is. But I think they do a great job of marketing those nights where, you're expected to come find a group there.
So I want to insert something parenthetically here, and that is, if you walk into a game store, I don't know about board game cafes, but if you walk into a game store, somewhere is the calendar. Any place that has tables, there's a calendar. It might be a whiteboard on the wall. It might be printed in a stack of sheets of paper, but they will have a calendar that says what events they're doing, which nights. And typically they'll have, an introductory night where they're taking a game that just came out and they're introducing it. And they'll have where their magic names are, and they'll have the competitive nights marked. Maybe they're tournaments, maybe they're just more, a store competition, but they'll mark them, and they'll mark them in such a way that normally you can tell what level of seriousness you have to approach that night with to support Shane's point.
And I think most of them you can find online too. If you're socially at the point you don't necessarily want to go and ask to find out, I think you can find them. Most of them find them online as well. At the same time, most of them, their business is board games, so their websites aren't the best quality, but the information's out there.
So we were in Epic Loot yesterday. Mm-hmm. We were down in the Centerville area, and for those of you who are in Dayton, and we were at Epic Loot, which is one of the larger game stores in our area, and there were 5 Dungeons and Dragons style games. I don't know exactly what rule system they were doing, and they were clearly people who were a group, but looking at the variety of people there, I mean, you look at them and you've got people who are in their 50s and people who are in their 30s and people and they're all playing D&D. D&D is not typically a game that you pick up once and walk away from, right? You're going to play with that group continuously. My point being, even if it tends to draw in total strangers, a lot of game stores, those total strangers will eventually become a group, right? So that has its good points and bad points, because you've got a gaming group. It may not be in your home, it may not be in somebody else's home, but you've got a gaming group. The flip side of that is there's some breaking into a group. If that's formed and it's formed with a crust, that you might have to break through that. Even in a game store.
Yeah, there's definitely some pruning that takes place, really, in any group, because even going and playing Magic, I play a lot at Gem City Games down in, they were Kettering, that might be Centerville now. They moved not too long ago. I really like them because when I actually go, it's for like 6 hours because I can't go often, and they tolerate me for that long. So I'm a big fan if they're going to tolerate me.
Yeah, our gaming group does not tolerate him for this long.
So they put me in a corner in our game group after a while, and I gotta sit at the corner and talk to myself. But I'm not crying. You're crying. No, but really. So even down there, you kind of get a sense of like, these people are a little too competitive for me, or these people don't care and they just want to, screw me in a game. So you kind of get a sense of people. If you're going somewhere fairly often too, you'll kind of get to know the regulars and know who they are and, what type of gaming they do. So
one of the other things, and we will have, I think we're going to probably spend some time, if not this season, next season, talking a little bit about forming a group, your own group within your home. But one of the big differences is that if you go into a store, if you can break through the crust, any crust that is there, and it's not always there, you immediately have a group to play with. Whereas if you're trying to build a home group, yes, my gaming group, and I'll call it mine because I originated it, it's been going on for 10 years, but it's not been the same people all 10 years. People have come and gone, either because they decided this wasn't the hobby for them, or some other reason they've selected out. Life has overcome the level of interest they have. Some people were, in terms of you guys, we just didn't know you when it started. So there's kind of more of an evolution where if you're looking for, I want to play tonight, you can show up at a game store and you can play that night.
Yeah.
That's not going to work necessarily with a home group.
Yeah, Brent, I'm kind of interested in hearing, what was your experience of walking into this group for the first time or the second time? What was that experience like?
So I'm very much an introvert, if you couldn't tell already. So walking in here was a little scary. I'm not going to lie. My wife came home and was like, "Oh yeah, we're going to go over this place." I work with with this lady, and they invited us to go play games. I was like, okay, what do we do? How does this work?
I need more details.
I played some games, but help me. She's like, I don't know. We're just gonna go.
So, and you were not a board gamer at the time, really.
I had played some games, but I wasn't a big board gamer at the time. So we did. We came over. I played China, and I enjoyed it, obviously, because we came back. But I don't know that I knew what to expect at all coming in. And when I got there, I didn't know anybody. My wife didn't play with me, so I didn't even know anybody who sat down at the table.
She abandoned you.
So I kind of just got thrown in there. It worked out great, but it was scary to walk into an established group of people. Everyone knows everybody who's coming in, and pick that up.
2 questions, because I don't remember this far back. Because this is what, 4 years ago?
6 years?
6 years ago?
I think.
Okay, so
5,
when that happened, how many people were there that day? Do you have a feel for that?
There were 5 of us who played China, and I think the 3 girls played Pandemic.
When you say 3 girls, so the first time you guys came, because Matt and Annette started coming because of you guys. We didn't know them. We got to know them through you. When Matt and Annette started, did they come that first time?
No.
Okay.
Tiffany and Cindy were playing with Lindsay, I believe, and Pandemic.
Which is interesting, because
I think it was just the 3 of them.
Because Lindsay knew not only my wife, but knew Tiffany and
she
Cindy.
Knew both of them.
Yes. So she was not in the same place you were.
I think that's what happened the first time. I don't remember for sure. I sat down. I know John was there. You were there. George was there. Todd, I believe, was there.
Oh, Tom. Okay.
Because John ended up having to leave halfway through the game, and so we just kind of left his pieces on the board.
Huh. That's small. The first time I started coming, the first few times there was like 15 people. That was in the summertime. I started coming in the summer, so that's always a little different. But
and so. Yes.
I feel like that was a transition period.
It was.
It was.
Yeah.
It very much was. This group, 2 things were going on. First of all, we had people who shortly thereafter stopped coming, and we had people who were just starting to come. So it was one of those times where it kind of ballooned up a little bit, which does not typically last very long.
Because quite a few times we had 2 games upstairs and then 1 game downstairs.
Right.
My first few times.
That tends to happen a little bit more in the summer, too, because people... I don't know why, but people come more in the summer. I think that happens
across the board. Everybody does more stuff in the summer.
I think that's true, but I would think that an indoor activity like board gaming would not be it. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, but people have more time because there's not as much going on with families.
That could be.
Holidays.
I also think when I started coming, China was kind of a heavy game for the group.
Which is funny because now it's like...
Which now we pull it out, we're like,
what's a light game we just want to get through and enjoy.
Right. And that, it's what, supposed to be 45 minutes to an hour, and it's typically a half an hour for us.
Because we played that last game day, and I had never played it before, but, I mean, I picked it up in 2 minutes.
I came in last, by the way, on that one, too, but...
Yes.
I don't think I've got my head wrapped around the strategy in that game. Even though I've played it 6, 8 times, I don't...
It was good.
I don't think... I love it.
It's a good game.
And part of the reason I love it is because there's a lot of strategy in there for, 4 pages of rules. That's it. That's a light rule. Yeah. It's very light in terms of rules. But anyway.
Do you play with your hand revealed in that one, or is your hand secret? I don't remember.
It's secret.
But because it feels like almost abstract, but not. I mean, the hidden, your hand isn't.
I mean, you're drafting your hand from publicly available cards each turn. So anyone who's watching could have an idea of what you have.
Abstract.
Yeah, so it's certainly themeless. The theme is there's just a veneer of a theme on it.
Right. Yeah, so I do think, Brent, as you were just talking about coming into the group brand new, that there's an inherent risk, social risk of either A, joining a new group in somebody's home, or B, going and playing at a public place, at a game store, game cafe, or whatever it is.
Well, and that's why I was asking if there were normally put together groups or groups that came, because those are very different situations to get into in my mind. If you're one of many coming together, great, no one knows each other and you're not coming into anything that people know. If you're one being thrown in, then you just kind of roll with the crowd.
And I think the biggest advantage of going to these board game cafes is twofold. One, you pretty much have the opportunity to play a game you've never played before. If you're into that, right, you can pick a game off the shelf, learn a new game, and you're not putting a lot of money towards it. So it's a pretty cheap, easy way to try out new games, experience new games. And then 2, it very much feels like a special event. Like, right, we all enjoy playing games in each other's homes, but there's something about going out that makes it special. About, right, it's just like the difference between having dinner in your house or going out to dinner.
Or watching a movie on your TV.
Yeah, versus going to the theater.
Yeah.
So it provides that kind of elevated experience of something special. And so I think those are 2 huge advantages, especially board game cafes, of going, right, you can get a beer you've never had before, try a game you've never had before, maybe play with people you haven't played before and really make it a night out of it rather than just, us coming to your place and playing a game. And not that that's not special, because it is, but, it's just a cool, different experience. So even though the other 2 at the table haven't had a ton of experience playing in public, again, anytime you're going to play either with a new group or out in public, go understanding that, it's going to be a risk. It's going to be difficult. You may not find a great group to play with, but I think the hobby is worth sticking those kinds of things out. And if you do have a group and you guys want to do something special, I definitely recommend checking out a board game cafe or even going to just a board game store, and asking if they're willing to open up a new game and have you guys play it and see what they think. So thanks for listening. We hope that you go check out your local board game shop or board game cafe. And if you're into Magic, get out there and play on a Friday night as well. So thanks for listening. We hope you invite others to listen. And as always, we hope you get to play some games and have a good time.
This has been the Analog Gamers Podcast. Thanks for listening. Please spread the word about our podcast, which can be found at theanaloggamers.libsyn.com. You can email us at theanaloggamers@gmail.com or find us on Facebook as The Analog Gamers. Our intro and outro are recorded by Daniel Feldman. Logo artwork provided by Tabitha Jordan Nichols. The Analog Gamers Podcast is licensed under Attribution, No Commercial, Non-Derivative, Creative Commons 4.0 license.